A man with no money, no connections, and no education showed up at Thomas Edison's laboratory looking like a tramp. He hadn't come to ask for a job. He'd come to become Edison's business partner. Everyone would have laughed at him. Edison didn't. 5 years later, that man was rich beyond anything he could have imagined. Not because he got lucky, but because he understood a secret that most people will go their entire lives without discovering. That secret became the foundation of one of the best-selling books in history. This is Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill spent 25 years studying over 500 of the wealthiest and most successful people in American history. Names like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, John D. Rockefeller, and dozens more. He didn't just read about these people. He sat across from them, he asked them questions. He studied how they thought, how they planned, and how they turned invisible ideas into very real fortunes. What Hill discovered was a pattern, a formula, 13 principles that every single one of these people followed, whether they knew it or not. And in 1937, in the middle of the Great Depression, when millions of people had lost everything, he published that formula in a book called Think and Grow Rich. Now let me be honest with you. This is not just a book about money. Hill himself says that riches cannot always be measured in dollars. This book is about how to take a thought, a dream, a desire, an idea, and turn it into something real, something you can see and touch and live inside of, whether that's financial freedom, a thriving business, a fulfilling career, or simply the peace of mind that comes from knowing you are in control of your own destiny. In the next 42 minutes, I'm going to walk you through every major idea in this book, every principle, every story, every lesson that has changed the lives of millions of people over the past 9 decades. And I promise you, if you stay with me, you will not hear this book the same way you hear most advice. This one hits different. Let's begin where Hill begins. With a man, a dream, and a freight train. Edwin C. Barnes had a problem. He wanted to go into business with the most famous inventor in the world, Thomas Edison. Not work for him, work with him. As equal partners, there was just one issue. Barnes had no money. He had no connections. He didn't even have enough cash to buy a train ticket to Edison's laboratory in New Jersey. So he did what most people would never do. He climbed onto a freight train and rode it like a drifter. When he arrived at Edison's office, he looked like a tramp. Edison himself later admitted it. But here's what Edison also said, and this is important. He said there was something in the expression on that young man's face, something that told Edison this person was not leaving until he got what he came for. Edison gave him a chance. Not the partnership, not yet. Just a low-level job in the office, and Barnes took it. He swept floors. He did whatever was needed. Not for weeks, not for months, for 5 years. 5 years of waiting, watching, and keeping that burning desire alive in his mind. To everyone around him, he was just another worker. But inside his own head, he was Edison's partner. Every single day. Then one day, the opportunity came, and it didn't look like an opportunity at all. Edison had invented a new dictating machine, and none of his salesmen wanted anything to do with it. They thought it was a tough sell. Barnes looked at that machine and saw his entire future. He told Edison he could sell it, and he did. He sold it so well that Edison gave him a national distribution contract. The business slogan became a partnership credit. Edison made the product, Barnes installed it. Think about that. Barnes showed up with nothing, absolutely nothing, except one thing. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he refused to quit until he got it. That is the foundation this entire book is built on. But Hill doesn't just tell you success stories. He also tells you what happens when people quit too soon. During the gold rush, a man named R.U. Darby and his uncle struck gold in Colorado. Real gold. They raised money from family and friends, bought machinery, and started mining. The first shipments confirmed it. They had one of the richest mines in the state. Then the vein of gold disappeared. They drilled, they searched, nothing. Eventually they gave up. They sold everything, all that expensive equipment, to a junk dealer for a few $100s and went home. That junk dealer did something Darby and his uncle never thought to do. He hired an engineer, a geologist, someone with specialized knowledge, and that engineer found the gold vein just 3 feet from where Darby had stopped drilling. 3 feet. The junk dealer pulled millions of dollars out of that mine. Now here's what makes this story even more powerful. Darby never forgot that lesson. He went into the life insurance business and became one of the top salesmen in the entire country, and every single time a prospect told him no, he'd think to himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold once. I will never stop again. Hill wants you to understand something right from the start. Failure is a trickster. It loves to show up right before success. More than 500 of America's most successful people told Hill the same thing. Their greatest breakthrough came just one step beyond the point where defeat had overtaken them. So the question is, are you 3 feet from your own gold right now? And if you are, would you even know it? This is where the real work begins. Hill says the starting point of all riches is a single word: desire. Not a wish, not a hope, not it would be nice if, a burning, obsessive, all-consuming desire that takes over your mind and refuses to let go. And Hill doesn't just tell you to want things harder. He gives you a specific, step-by-step method for turning desire into reality. 6 steps. Here they are. Step 1. Decide the exact amount of money you want. Not a lot or enough to be comfortable. An exact number. Step 2. Decide exactly what you are willing to give in return for that money. Nothing is free. Step 3. Set a definite deadline. Step 4. Create a plan and start immediately, whether you feel ready or not. Step 5. Write all of this down in a clear statement. In step 6, this is the big one. Read that statement out loud twice every day. Once when you wake up, once before you sleep. And as you read it, see yourself already in possession of the money. Feel it. Believe it is already yours. Think about it. How many of us have ever sat down and written a specific dollar amount, a specific deadline, and a specific plan? Most people never do this once in their entire lives. Hill says that's exactly why most people never accumulate real wealth. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That sounds like wishful thinking. That sounds like something people write on a vision board and then forget about. But Hill is very clear. This is not magic. This is psychology. When you saturate your subconscious mind with a specific desire backed by a specific plan, read with genuine emotion and belief, your mind begins to work on that problem constantly. It starts noticing opportunities you would have missed. It starts generating ideas you wouldn't have had. It starts pulling you toward your goal like gravity. But Hill doesn't just leave it at theory. He proves it with one of the most emotional stories in the entire book. Napoleon Hill's son, Blair, was born without ears. No physical sign of ears at all. The doctor told Hill the child might be deaf and mute for life. Hill refused to accept it. He made a decision, right there, in the silence of his own heart, that his son would hear and speak. He didn't know how. He just knew he would find a way. So he started planning a burning desire to hear in his son's mind. He told him bedtime stories designed to build self-reliance, imagination, and the belief that his condition was not a handicap. It was an advantage. He told Blair that teachers would give him extra attention, that customers would pay him extra when he sold newspapers, that his so-called disability would actually be his greatest asset. And here's what happened. Blair grew up refusing to learn sign language. He went through regular schools. He sold newspapers on the street as a boy, borrowing 6 cents from a neighbor to get started and earning 42 cents in profit on his first day. His mother cried when she found him asleep with the coins clutched in his hand. Hill laughed because he knew the experiment was working. Then, in Blair's last week of college, he tried a new electrical hearing device. Previous ones hadn't worked, but this time, almost as if by a stroke of magic, he could hear. For the first time in his life, he heard his mother's voice on the telephone. He heard his professors. He heard the radio. Blair went on to devote his entire career to helping other deaf people hear. The disability became the asset, exactly as Hill had promised. And when doctors examined Blair years later, X-rays showed there was no opening from where his ears should be to his brain. Medically, he should not have been able to hear at all. But he could. Hill's explanation? He mixed faith with the desire for his son to hear, communicated that desire persistently for years, and his son believed him. 3 ingredients: faith, desire, belief. The same 3 ingredients that drive every principle in this book. Ask yourself, what could you accomplish if you desired it with that kind of intensity? Hill calls faith the head chemist of the mind, and he makes a claim that might surprise you. Faith is not something you either have or you don't. It's not a gift, it's a skill, and you build it through repetition. Here's how Hill explains it. When you repeatedly tell your subconscious mind something, whether it's true or not, your subconscious eventually accepts it as reality. This works in both directions. If you repeat, "I'm bad with money," or "I'll never get ahead," your subconscious will accept that as an order and act accordingly. But if you repeat, "I am building wealth," with genuine emotion and conviction, your subconscious will accept that too and begin working to make it real. This is why Hill says that millions of people who believe themselves doomed to poverty are actually the creators of their own misfortune. It's not the universe punishing them, it's their own negative beliefs, picked up by the subconscious mind and translated into reality. Poverty consciousness is just as real and just as powerful as wealth consciousness. The difference is that poverty consciousness develops automatically, by default, while wealth consciousness has to be built on purpose. But let me tell you a story that shows what faith can do when it's mixed with imagination and a definite plan. In December 1900, a 38-year-old steel executive named Charles Schwab was invited to a dinner in New York with 80 of America's wealthiest financiers. Even J.P. Morgan was there. Schwab was supposed to give a short, polite speech. Instead, he spoke for 90 minutes. And what he described was a vision of consolidating the entire American steel industry into one massive, efficient corporation that could dominate the world market. When Schwab finished, Morgan pulled him aside. They sat on a window ledge and talked for another hour. Within weeks, Morgan and Schwab had negotiated with Andrew Carnegie to buy his steel empire for $400 million. Carnegie reportedly told Morgan on a ship afterward, "I wish I had asked for $100 million more." Morgan replied, "If you had, you would have gotten it." The United States Steel Corporation was born, worth over $1 billion, the largest business enterprise the world had ever seen at that time. And it started as an idea in one man's mind, communicated with faith, backed by a plan, and put into action with persistence. Hill wants you to understand that this principle isn't reserved for steel tycoons. It's available to anyone. The same faith that created U.S. Steel can help you create whatever it is you're building, if you're willing to put in the work of developing it. So how do you actually build faith? Hill's answer is autosuggestion, the practice of deliberately feeding your subconscious mind the thoughts you want it to act on. This is the mechanism behind the 6 steps from the Desire chapter. When Hill tells you to read your written statement aloud, twice a day, with emotion, that's autosuggestion. You are literally programming your own mind. But here's the catch most people miss. Hill says that merely reading words is completely useless if you don't mix them with feeling. You can repeat an affirmation 1,000,000 times, and if you say it with the emotional energy of someone reading a grocery list, nothing will happen. Your subconscious doesn't respond to words, it responds to emotion. Hill compares the subconscious to a fertile garden. If you don't plant the seeds of your choosing, weeds will grow on their own. That's what happens when you neglect your mind. Fear, doubt, and worry move in automatically. Autosuggestion is how you take back control. The practical instruction is straightforward. Go to a quiet place, close your eyes, repeat your desire statement aloud with as much feeling as you can generate. See the money, feel yourself already in possession of it. Do this every single day without exception. It will feel strange at first. Hill acknowledges that, but he says the results will come. Not immediately, but inevitably, if you persist. Think of it like tuning a radio to a specific frequency. At first you get static, but if you keep adjusting, eventually the signal comes through clearly. Autosuggestion is how you tune your mind to the frequency of what you want. Here's one of the most provocative ideas in the entire book. Hill says that knowledge is not power. Let me say that again. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is only potential power. It becomes actual power only when it's organized into a definite plan of action and directed toward a specific goal. Hill points out that university professors possess enormous knowledge, and most of them have very little money. Why? Because they specialize in teaching knowledge, not in using it to create wealth. And this leads to Hill's definition of education, which I think is brilliant. He says an educated person is not someone with a degree. An educated person is someone who has developed the ability to get whatever they want in life without violating the rights of others. That's it. By that definition, Henry Ford, who never finished high school, was one of the most educated people who ever lived. Hill tells a great courtroom story about Ford. A newspaper had called him an ignorant pacifist, and Ford sued. During the trial, the opposing lawyers tried to humiliate him by asking trivia questions. How many soldiers did Britain send during the Revolution? Who was Benedict Arnold? Ford couldn't answer most of them, but then Ford leaned forward, pointed at the lawyer, and said something that silenced the courtroom. He said, paraphrased, "I have a row of buttons on my desk. By pressing the right button, I can summon someone who can answer any question I want. So why would I fill my mind with information I don't need when I have people around me who can provide any knowledge I require?" The entire courtroom understood immediately. This was not an ignorant man. This was a man who understood the most important kind of knowledge, knowing how to find, organize, and use the knowledge of other people. And that is exactly what the mastermind principle is about, which we'll get to shortly. Hill's message here is clear. Don't let a lack of formal education stop you. Thomas Edison had 3 months of schooling. Andrew Carnegie started as a laborer. The knowledge you need to succeed can always be acquired, through books, through mentors, through people who know what you don't. What matters is what you do with it. Hill calls imagination the workshop where all plans are created, and he divides it into 2 types. The first is synthetic imagination. This is where you take existing ideas, concepts, and experiences and rearrange them into new combinations. Most practical planning uses synthetic imagination. The second is creative imagination. This is something different. Hill says creative imagination is the faculty through which the human mind has direct communication with what he calls infinite intelligence. This is where hunches come from, inspirations, those moments when an idea flashes into your mind from seemingly nowhere. To show you the power of imagination, Hill tells one of my favorite stories in the book. In the late 1800s, an old country doctor walked into a drugstore with a large brass kettle, a wooden stirring paddle, and a small slip of paper with a secret formula. He sold the whole lot to the young drug clerk for $500, every penny the clerk had. Now, that formula? It was the recipe for a drink, and the young clerk who bought it was Asa Candler. The drink was Coca-Cola. Hill's point is this. The doctor had the formula, but he didn't have the imagination to see what it could become. Candler did. He added the missing ingredient, not a chemical, but an idea. Marketing, distribution, branding. That old brass kettle became the foundation of one of the largest companies on earth, an empire built not on the formula, but on one man's imagination. Hill tells another story that's equally powerful. A young preacher named Frank Gonzalez dreamed for 2 years about building a new kind of college, one where students would learn by doing, not just by sitting in lectures. He needed $1 million. He had no idea where to get it. Then one Saturday, something shifted. He stopped thinking about the $1 million and made a decision. He said to himself, "I will get that money within 1 week." He announced a sermon called "What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million." The next morning, he preached that sermon with everything he had. He forgot his notes at home, so he spoke from the heart, from his subconscious, from years of burning desire. When he finished, a man walked slowly up from the 3rd row. His name was Philip D. Armour, one of the richest men in Chicago. Armour said, "Reverend, I liked your sermon. I believe you can do everything you said. Come to my office tomorrow morning. I will give you the $1 million. And he did. Gonzalez founded the Armour Institute of Technology. $1 million, delivered within 36 hours of making a definite decision. That is the power of desire mixed with imagination mixed with faith. Let's get brutally honest for a moment. How many ideas have you had that you never acted on? How many times have you thought, I should do something with this, and then let it die? Hill would say those ideas were trying to reach you through your creative imagination, and he'd say the only thing standing between those ideas and reality is a plan. Which brings us to the next principle. This is the longest and most practical chapter in the book. Hill's message is simple but urgent. Desire without a plan is just daydreaming. You need organized, written plans, and you need a team. Hill gives 4 essential rules for planning. First, form a mastermind alliance, a group of people who bring skills, knowledge, and experience that you lack. Second, decide what you're offering them in return for their cooperation. Nobody works for free. Third, meet regularly, at least twice a week. Fourth, maintain perfect harmony within the group. If harmony breaks down, the mastermind breaks down. And here's the part that most people resist. Hill says if your first plan fails, replace it. If the second plan fails, replace that one too. Keep going until you find a plan that works. He says the majority of people meet failure and stop, and that's exactly why they stay poor. Hill reminds us that Thomas Edison went through 10,000 failed attempts before perfecting the light bulb. 10,000. But each one was just a plan that didn't work, not evidence that the goal was impossible. This chapter also contains what I think is one of the most useful sections in the entire book. Hill's list of the 30 major causes of failure. Things like lack of a well-defined purpose, procrastination, lack of persistence, wrong selection of a career, fear of criticism, negative personality, lack of self-discipline, and the habit of spending beyond your means. Be honest with yourself for a moment. How many of these 30 causes of failure apply to your own life right now? Hill says this list is not meant to discourage you. It's meant to show you exactly where to focus your energy. He also includes a 28-question self-analysis questionnaire that he recommends you complete at the end of every year. Questions like, have I delivered the best possible quality of service? Have I been persistent? Have I permitted any of the 6 basic fears to reduce my effectiveness? Hill is essentially saying, treat your life like a business. Take inventory. Audit yourself honestly. Because you can't fix what you don't measure. Hill analyzed over 25,000 people who had experienced failure, and he found that lack of decision, procrastination, was near the very top of the list. On the other side, he found that every person who had accumulated a fortune had one thing in common. They made decisions quickly and changed them slowly, not the other way around. Henry Ford was a perfect example. He was famously stubborn about his Model T. He kept producing it long after his advisors told him to change the design. Was he too slow to change? Maybe, but that same stubbornness of decision built him one of the largest fortunes in American history. Hill says it's better to be too firm in your decisions than too quick to change them. And Hill gives a crucial warning here. He says the number one thing that destroys good decisions is other people's opinions. Family, friends, co-workers, they all have opinions. And opinions, Hill says, are the cheapest commodities on earth. His advice, keep your plans to yourself. Share them only with your mastermind group, people who are in complete sympathy with your purpose. Everyone else gets to see the results after you've achieved them. Now, Hill does something unexpected here. He doesn't prove his point with a business story. He proves it with the birth of an entire nation. He traces it back to 1770, when Samuel Adams and John Hancock truly decided, that British soldiers had to be removed from Boston. That decision, made by just 2 men, was the seed of American independence. Adams was offered bribes and threatened with execution by the British governor. His response? He told the governor's messenger, paraphrased, "Tell the governor that I have made my peace with the King of Kings. No personal consideration will make me abandon my country." From that decision came the Correspondence Committees, then the Continental Congress, and finally, on July 4, 1776, 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence, each one knowing he was potentially signing his own death warrant. Hill's point is profound. The power that gave birth to an entire nation was not military force, it was decision. The same power is available to you, not to birth a nation, but to birth the life you want. If there's one chapter in this book that separates those who will succeed from those who won't, it's this one. Hill says persistence is to character what carbon is to steel. Without it, nothing else matters. And he's blunt about the reality. He says the majority of people are good starters but poor finishers. They get excited, they begin, and then at the first sign of resistance, they quit. Meanwhile, the small percentage who keep going, the Fords, the Carnegies, the Edisons, end up with everything. Hill tells the story of Fannie Hurst, a writer who moved to New York in 1915 with nothing but a dream of turning words into wealth. For 4 years, she worked by day and wrote by night. The Saturday Evening Post rejected her 36 times. 36 rejection slips. Most people would have quit after 5, maybe 10. Fannie Hurst said to Broadway, "You may whip some people, but you will not whip me." And eventually Broadway got tired. Publishers started coming to her. Hollywood came calling. The movie rights to one of her novels sold for $100,000, reportedly the highest price ever paid for a story before publication. Hill also tells us about Kate Smith, who sang for years without pay in front of any microphone she could find, and about W.C. Fields, who was broke and past 60 during the Depression, offered to work in movies for free, injured his neck, and kept going until he got his break. The pattern is always the same. Persistence, persistence, persistence. Hill gives you 4 steps to develop it. 1. Have a definite purpose backed by a burning desire. 2. Have a definite plan expressed in continuous action. 3. Close your mind to all negative and discouraging influences. 4. Find at least one person who will encourage you to follow through. That's it. Those 4 steps, followed consistently, will produce persistence. And persistence will produce everything else. But Hill also warns about the silent killer of persistence, the fear of criticism. He says most ideas are still born because people are afraid of what others will think. He himself experienced it. When Andrew Carnegie asked him to spend 20 years organizing a philosophy of success, Hill's first reaction was a flood of self-doubt. "You can't do it, it's too big. What will people think? Who are you to aim this high?" He almost let those fears win. And if he had, this book would never have existed. Over 100 million copies gone because of fear. Ask yourself, what idea have you killed because you were afraid someone might laugh? Hill defines the mastermind as coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between 2 or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. And he says it's the principle behind virtually every great fortune ever built. The concept has 2 dimensions. The first is economic. When you surround yourself with intelligent, skilled people who are committed to your shared goal, you gain access to knowledge, experience, and resources that no single person could ever possess alone. The second dimension is what Hill calls psychic. When 2 or more minds coordinate in harmony, they create a third force, an invisible, intangible energy that is greater than the sum of its parts. Andrew Carnegie's mastermind group consisted of about 50 people. Carnegie himself admitted he knew almost nothing about the technical side of making steel. He didn't need to. His genius was in assembling, coordinating, and maintaining harmony among people who did. He attributed his entire fortune to this one principle. Henry Ford started with nothing, poverty, no education, no influence. But his rise became unstoppable once he formed close friendships with Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone, John Burroughs, and Luther Burbank. Hill says Ford didn't just learn from these men, he absorbed their mental energy, their patterns of thought, their power. Here's the lesson. You do not have to know everything. You do not have to do everything. But you must surround yourself with people who together know and do what you cannot. That alliance, maintained in harmony, is the source of all great power. This is the chapter nobody expects, and it might be the most misunderstood idea in the entire book. When Hill says sex transmutation, he is not talking about repressing desire. He's talking about redirecting it. Hill observed that the most successful people in history, leaders, artists, inventors, business titans, all had one thing in common beyond desire, faith, and persistence. They were highly driven by sexual energy, but instead of dissipating that energy purely through physical expression, they channeled it into their work, their creativity, their vision. Hill lists 10 stimuli that can raise the mind to a higher vibration. Sex desire is number 1. Love is number 2. Then comes desire for fame and money, music, friendship, mastermind alliances, and others. When any of these stimuli, especially the first 2, are combined with focused effort, they unlock what Hill calls the creative imagination. That's the faculty through which original ideas are born. And here's a fascinating finding from Hill's research. He says most men don't hit their peak achievement until after age 40. Why? Because before 40, they waste their most powerful creative energy. It's only when a man learns, usually by accident, to redirect that energy into his work, that he begins to produce at the level of genius. Hill names George Washington, Napoleon, Shakespeare, Lincoln, Emerson, and Edison among those who drew their greatest power from transmuted sex energy. He's not saying desire is bad, he's saying it's rocket fuel, and most people light it on fire instead of putting it in the engine. This might be the most uncomfortable chapter in the book, but it's also one of the most important. And if you think about the periods in your own life when you were most productive, most creative, most driven, you might find that Hill is onto something. Everything we've discussed so far, desire, faith, autosuggestion, imagination, planning, all of it passes through one gateway, the subconscious mind. Hill calls it the connecting link between the human mind and infinite intelligence. The subconscious works day and night. It doesn't take breaks, it doesn't sleep, and it doesn't discriminate between constructive and destructive thoughts. Whatever you feed it most consistently is what it acts on. Hill identifies 7 positive emotions that fuel the subconscious: desire, faith, love, sex, enthusiasm, romance, and hope, and 7 negative emotions that poison it: fear, jealousy, hatred, revenge, greed, superstition, and anger. His rule is simple: positive and negative emotions cannot occupy the mind at the same time. Whichever you feed more will dominate, and this is why Hill says most prayer doesn't work. Not because prayer itself is flawed, but because most people pray only after everything else has failed, which means they go to prayer filled with fear and doubt. And fear and doubt are exactly what the subconscious transmits. So the prayer, in effect, produces the opposite of what was intended. Hill compares the brain to a radio broadcasting station. Just as sound has to be stepped up to travel through the airwaves, thoughts have to be amplified by emotion to be transmitted by the subconscious. When you charge your thoughts with strong positive emotion, particularly faith, love, and sex, they vibrate at a frequency powerful enough to reach other minds, and Hill believes infinite intelligence itself. Now, you can take this literally or metaphorically. Either way, the practical lesson is the same. Your thoughts, charged with emotion, shape your reality. Guard them carefully. The final principle, the 13th step, is what Hill calls the 6th sense. He describes it as the apex of the entire philosophy, the point where intuition, creative imagination, and connection to something greater than yourself all converge. Hill says the 6th sense can only be developed after mastering the other 12 principles. It comes through meditation, self-examination, and years of practice. And it manifests as hunches, flashes of insight that warn you of danger or alert you to opportunity. But the most fascinating part of this chapter is Hill's personal practice, what he calls his invisible counselors. Every night before sleep, Hill would close his eyes and imagine himself sitting at a council table with 9 great men: Emerson, Thomas Paine, Edison, Darwin, Lincoln, Luther Burbank, Napoleon, Ford, and Carnegie. He would address each one by name and ask for specific character traits. Mr. Lincoln, I wish to build into my own character your sense of justice, your patience, your humor, and your tolerance. Mr. Edison, I wish to acquire your spirit of faith and your unremitting toil. Over time, something remarkable happened. These imaginary figures began to develop distinct personalities. Lincoln always arrived late, walked slowly with his hands behind his back, and rarely smiled. Burbank and Paine cracked jokes. Napoleon groaned at suggestions involving the church. One night, Lincoln appeared at Hill's bedside and told him, "The world will soon need your services. Go ahead and complete your philosophy." Hill insists these were purely imaginary experiences, but he says they led him into glorious paths of adventure and gave him access to ideas he could not have reached through ordinary thinking. Whether you see this as visualization, meditation, or something more mystical, the practice of mentally associating with greatness is one of the most powerful exercises in the book. Before any of this philosophy can work, Hill says, you have to face 6 enemies that live inside your own mind. He calls them the 6 ghosts of fear, and they are the reason most people never achieve anything. The 6 fears are the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. The fear of poverty is the most destructive. Hill says it paralyzes reason, destroys imagination, kills self-reliance, wipes out enthusiasm, and invites failure in every form. And it operates in a world of overabundance, a world where there is more than enough for everyone. The problem isn't the supply. The problem is the fear. The fear of criticism is just as damaging but more subtle. It's the reason people don't start businesses, don't pursue their dreams, don't write the book, don't ask for the raise. Hill says parents who constantly criticize their children commit a crime. They build inferiority complexes that can last a lifetime. The fear of ill health feeds on imagination gone wrong. Hill cites a physician who estimated that 75% of patients suffer from imaginary illness, real symptoms caused by negative thought patterns, not by actual disease. The fear of old age makes people slow down at 40, when Hill's research shows the most productive years are between 40 and 60. The fear of death traces primarily to religious teachings about eternal punishment, teachings that Hill calls tools of control rather than sources of comfort. And the fear of loss of love drives people into jealousy, suspicion, and desperate behavior. But Hill identifies a 7th evil that may be worse than all 6 fears combined: susceptibility to negative influences. This is the tendency to let other people's fear, doubt, and negativity infect your mind. It's the most dangerous because it operates silently. You don't even know it's happening. Hill's cure for all of this? Decision. Every one of these fears can be eliminated by making a firm decision. Decide to refuse poverty. Decide not to worry about what others think. Decide to accept aging as wisdom, not decline. Decide to view death as transition, not punishment. A man filled with fear cannot think clearly, cannot act decisively, and cannot attract anything but more fear. But a mind that has been deliberately cleared of these 6 ghosts, that mind becomes a magnet for riches. We've covered a lot of ground together. So let me distill this entire philosophy into the ideas that matter most. First, desire. Everything starts here. Not a wish, not a daydream, a burning obsession for something specific, written down, read aloud with emotion every single day. If your desire is weak, your results will be weak. Second, faith. You must believe before you see. Faith is built through repetition, by feeding your subconscious mind the thoughts you want it to act on until it accepts them as reality. Third, autosuggestion. This is the mechanism. You program your own mind through emotionalized repetition. Plain words do nothing. Emotional conviction changes everything. Fourth, specialized knowledge. Organized and applied. You don't need to know everything. You need to know where to find what you need, and you need a plan for using it. Fifth, imagination. This is the workshop. Every fortune, every invention, every breakthrough began as a thought that was shaped in someone's imagination. Sixth, organized planning. A dream without a plan is a fantasy. Write it down, build a team, and when the first plan fails, build another. Seventh, decision. Make them quickly, change them slowly, and stop letting other people's opinions determine your destiny. Eighth, persistence. This is the quality that separates everyone who almost made it from everyone who actually did. There is no substitute. Ninth, the mastermind. Surround yourself with allies who are smarter, more experienced, and more skilled than you. Maintain harmony. This alliance is your power source. 10th, transmutation. Channel your most powerful energies, especially desire, love, and creativity, into your work instead of dissipating them. And finally, master the 6 basic fears. Clear your mind of poverty consciousness, fear of criticism, worry about health, fear of aging, fear of death, and especially the tendency to absorb the negativity of others. These 13 principles are not theory. They were distilled from the lives of over 500 people who actually built enormous wealth. They work, but only if you use them. Napoleon Hill wrote this book during the darkest economic period in American history. People had lost everything, their jobs, their savings, their hope, and into that darkness, he offered a single radical idea: that riches begin in the mind, that the person who masters their own thoughts can master their financial destiny, that no one is defeated until they accept defeat as reality. Think and Grow Rich has sold over 100 million copies. It has been translated into dozens of languages, and nearly 90 years after it was published, people are still discovering it for the first time and having their lives changed by it. But reading isn't enough. Knowing isn't enough. Hill says it at least a dozen times throughout the book. You must apply these principles. You must write down your desire. You must read it daily. You must build your mastermind. You must persist. So let me ask you this. Which of these 13 principles hit you the hardest? Was it the power of desire? The importance of decision? The cure for fear? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know which idea you're going to start applying today. If you want to read the full book, and I really think you should, I've put links in the description to get it on Amazon and to listen free on Audible. Think and Grow Rich is in the public domain, which means you can also find free versions online. There is no excuse not to read this book. And if you enjoyed this summary, subscribe. I publish new book summaries every week, breaking down the greatest ideas ever written so you can use them to build the life you want. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Remember, every fortune begins as a single thought. What's yours?